It's now 5:30, so everybody can start taking their seats. As I said, it's 5:30 now, so this is a public workshop. It's been noticed on the village's website. We've let everybody know. If you're this is also being broadcast on Zoom. If you go to the village's website to the meetings and agenda, and you go to today's meeting workshop, on the left side under meeting overview, we have several items so you can follow along. We're going to talk about them tonight. We're going to have a presentation by our planning director, Jennifer. That's called the Public Workshop Properties. Then we have a master list of all the properties owned by the village, which I think I first put out there in May, but it's been out there for a while. I also added the resolutions for 3 properties that are the main focus tonight, and that is the Island Community Church, the Island Silver and Spice, and the Machado properties. They're the 3 main properties we want to discuss tonight. Although we have a lot of properties, most of them are conservation or wastewater, et cetera. There's not a whole lot of discussion needed because we can't do much with them. And so we wanted to focus tonight on those 3 properties, but this is a public input session, and it's open to whatever you want to do. It's informal. I'm not going to have a Captain Ed clock. Just try not to abuse it. There will be a 3 or 5 minute, but just try to be consistent. And for those watching on TV, I'm Ron Saunders. I'm the Alamorado Village Manager. We're having a public workshop. It came up at our last village council meeting that I was going to propose to the council to maybe put the Island Community Church, which we bought last year, put it for sale. And Steve mentioned that Friedman, who's here, we have our Councilman Steve Friedman, we have Councilwoman Deb Gillis, and Councilwoman Anna Richards. And I believe our mayor's going to be watching on Zoom, and Don Horton has a meeting. He's going to join us later on Zoom. So all 5 council people have an interest in hearing the public's input. And we're going to try to get as much as we can tonight. But once again, I want to focus on those 3 particular properties because they're the ones we actually, I think, can do something with. And I wanted to hear that before we make any decisions at the council level. With that, we're going to have all the public comment, but what I'd like to do is take it out of order because Jennifer has a presentation, which is on the website. But let's go ahead and have her, it's for those 3 properties. And then the public comment can be afterwards. Rather than having public comment, then maybe she can answer the questions. I want her to go first, answer them, and then we'll have public comment as long as we want to. So this is our planning director, Jennifer.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Let me just get settled for a second. All right. Again, for those who don't know me, I'm Jennifer DeBobrian. I'm the planning director here in the village. As Ron said, we're going to talk tonight about the 3 properties, the Island Community Church, the Island Silver and Spice, and then what's known as the Machado lots. So the presentation will focus on those 3 properties. The presentation is very generic. It's mostly background and zoning and use information. And then the idea is to get input from you guys as to what you'd like to see there or what your intention for these properties would be for the village to do with these properties. So with that, let's see if I do this right. And I'm not doing it right. Which one am I supposed to hit, Frank? Why is it not working? I'm trying to. There we go. Oh, I went too far. There we go. Okay, again, so the 3 properties in question are 83250 Overseas Highway, the Island Community Church, 81981 Overseas Highway, known as Island Silver and Spice, or Walgreens to some people, and then vacant land on Overseas Highway, approximately at mile marker 88.9, which is known as the Machado lots. The first one is, again, 83250 Overseas Highway. It's the former Island Community Church. They sold this to the village in 2024 for $3.9 million. They moved their operation up the street a little north to what was the school, so that's where they are now. They just finished, I think they opened a couple weeks ago or about a month ago maybe now, and handed the keys back over to the village. We had leased it back to them, and they handed the keys back over, so now it's back into the village's custody. So the question is, what do we want to do with the church? Currently, the property is zoned, come on. I don't know why I'm having such trouble with this. There we go. Public and semi-public services, or PS zoning. That is section 30-701 of the Village Code, which outlines all the uses. I did list the permitted uses, which would not require any kind of conditional use. So these, I'm not going to read them all. You can read them. And as Ron said, this whole presentation is on our website, so you can look there. But all of those are permitted uses that would be allowed by right in that zoning district. There are other uses that are allowed with a minor conditional use, and those would include a community pier or public dock, a docking facility, health-related institutions, a hospital complex, a recycling center, a rehab center, a sports arena, a wireless facility. And then for a major conditional use, the only allowed uses would be a helipad, a school, or outdoor storage and display. So there are some additional uses, but they would require additional permitting. So those are the permitted uses. Now, as Ron suggested, that he asked the council to consider selling this property, but also asked them to consider rezoning this property. This is a very strict zoning district, doesn't have a lot of allowed uses, so he suggested that we look at rezoning it to a more open zoning district that had more uses allowed. He asked me what would be the most flexible zoning district, and so that would be highway commercial. That would give the most options for uses in that district. So that's up for consideration, I think, on Tuesday night as well, right, as part of that vote. So that's another option that we can do as well. So, but right now it is, again, public and semi-public services. 81981 Overseas Highway, known as Island Silver and Spice, is also the Walgreens. It's 3 lots. You'll see the dotted lines separate the 3 different lots there. That was purchased by the village in 2021 for $2.75 million. The village purchased this property ultimately to prevent commercial development there. And there is a deed restriction on the property that there can never be a pharmacy there. This is zoned Village Center zoning district, which is a rather flexible commercial zoning district. It's outlined in 30-692 of the Village Code. Okay. These are the allowed permitted uses in VC, or Village Center. They include, anything from residential to, fire station, library, municipal parking, and then low and medium intensity office, retail service uses up to 3,000 square feet. And then there's a list of specific retail service office uses. It's too extensive. It was too extensive. I would have had like 20 slides. So I didn't put all of those in there, but just to give you an idea of some of them, they include, accountant, architect, engineer, those kinds of things, professional services, but then also art galleries, bakeries, bait shops, bookstores, camera shops, daycare centers, on and on. It goes on and on for, 3 pages worth of things. So that can be found again in section 30-692 of our code. I have one copy here. If you want to look at it later, I can show you specifically what is allowed in that zoning district, permitted. This also has minor conditional uses and major conditional uses with it as well. I got to flip to those. Those, include hotels and motels, larger commercial spaces, brew pubs, docking facilities, wireless facilities, private clubs, convenience stores with gas, marina redevelopment. So those are the kinds of things that will be allowed with a conditional use permit in this zoning district. And then the vacant land on Overseas at, again, approximately 88.9 is known as the Machado lots. So I'm going to point this out because it was brought to my attention that the blue square, I understand, is only 1 lot, but it's actually 4 lots. It's this, and this. These 4 lots make up the Machado So, and for those of you watching at home, I know you couldn't see that, but it's the one that's outlined in blue and the 3 to the north of it, are what are considered the Machado lots. And, I had changed my slide, but it didn't make it on this presentation. The village purchased all of those lots for a total of $1.8 million in 2021. That number was incorrect. And 1.8.
And by the way, the resolutions that are on the website, they have two different ones. So it shows both of them being purchased. So that made it a little confusing because there were two different, there was an addendum to the resolution, I guess, to make it come up to the 1.7.
Yeah. And then their resolution 21-04-38, approved by the village council, restricts the use of this property to affordable housing. So if we were to do something with this property right now as it stands, because of that resolution, as it was voted, it would have to be workforce affordable housing. That's not to say that, the council couldn't, reconsider that resolution and make a different change, but as it stands right now, that's the restriction with the resolution to purchase the property was workforce affordable housing. That was the intent. This property is zoned residential single family, or R1. That's section 30-684 of the village code. And literally has 3 permitted uses: single family detached dwelling unit, multifamily attached or detached single family deed restricted affordable housing of up to 4 dwelling units on lots fronting on US 1, and accessory uses and structures excluding guest houses. Those are the only permitted uses allowed in R1. And as far as conditional uses, there are no major conditional uses allowed, and the only minor conditional uses allowed are homeowners parks, infrastructure and municipal utilities, and a park. So R1 is a very restrictive zoning district. So that was really the basis for my presentation. I'm happy to take questions about any of these properties or anything else. And I don't know if Ron has anything to add, but that's really the basis for my presentation.
And once again, this is all on the website. If you go to the meetings and agenda tab, click on tonight's meeting, and you look at the meeting overview. So for example, going to the issue about the Machado property, there's actually 2 resolutions. One says, and the reason why it's going for housing is the council approved the use of the affordable housing in lieu of fees and especially sales tax for the purchase. So one is for $850,000, and the one right next to it, at least in the agenda here, says $951,000. So I think that's what Jennifer was saying, was that there's 2 different authorizations. The total is 1.7. So when you put on it's been corrected, but the slide you saw shows just one of the purchases. But once again, all this is on the website. Going back to when 2021.
Correct. Yes.
Questions from the audience? Sue?
Ms. Miller.
Machado property,
Yes, ma'am.
there's 4 lots. 2 of them are dense hammock lots.
Yes, they are.
You want to come up and maybe, if people at home can't hear you, you can use this one. No, just stand up. But once again, we're televising this, and so the reason I'm asking to come up is because the people at home can't hear. And by the way, I want to point out, since the beginning of the meeting, that since we've started, Mayor Mahoney and Vice Mayor Don Horton have both texted me to make sure that everybody knows they're watching. We've also introduced Anna Richards, Deb Gillis, and Steve Friedman, who are in the audience. So all 5 village council members are listening tonight.
The question I have is that on the Machado property, we bought 4 lots. 2 are definitely densely wooded hammock lots, and I was wondering if the 4 can be combined so that we can build 16 affordable housing units without interfering with the hammock.
Yes, we absolutely can. Our code does allow for us to do that and to transfer the density to the disturbed portion or the disturbed lot and put a conservation restriction or protection on the hammock lots. Absolutely. You're welcome. Anyone else?
One other clarification, when Jennifer mentioned about the issue about the church, when she said a Tuesday, what she's referring to is the regular village council meeting on Tuesday, September 6th, on Tuesday, September 9th, not next Tuesday. There's nothing next Tuesday. We have budget hearings
Oh, I'm
coming
sorry.
up. But what she's talking about, there will be a motion that I put on the agenda for the September 9th regular village council meeting, which is basically saying to do authorization, at least put it up, the Allen Community Church up for sale, not that they have to sell it, and also look at changing the zoning. So that's going to be considered by the council at the September 9th meeting. So I would make sure people are trying to keep track of what meetings are what. And once again, that's up to the council to do. And the intention of it was just to see how much interest. We have some people in the audience that have some opinions on it. I've already gotten calls from some realtors, wonder who gets to get the listing. I've said that I know too many realtors and the council knows too many realtors. We didn't want to pick and choose. So if they decide to put it up for sale, it would just be available, and the village council would then have the right to accept or reject any type of contract. And then the zoning use was to put the highest and best value on the property. But once again, that's up to the village council to decide what to do. And we have a former member of the village council in the audience who actually voted to buy the church, and I think she would like to say, she's incapacitated, so can we, Elizabeth, do you want to give your opinion since you were there?
Well, my name is Elizabeth Jolin. I actually had to recuse myself from that purchase, thankfully, because I work for the broker who sold it. But I guess my question is really about why that is coming on the agenda, considering there has been no community input. And this is a friendly question. Like, I know this, I'm kind of thinking this is the first meeting in a community-wide discussion about how we might look at that property and to think about putting zoning changes before that robust, what I hope is a robust and meaningful question, I think is putting the cart before the horse, so to speak. So I just wonder if between now and September 9th, we're going to have a bunch of meetings so that the community can weigh in. I'm not sure if this group is necessarily representative of everyone who might weigh in. And, definitely, I'm so happy that we're having this conversation because it's never been had about any of these properties. So, how exciting, but I hope we have 99 meetings before we even entertain the idea of selling something.
I guess that question is more directed to me. My first meeting, I was selected, I started work on April 21st. My very first meeting was in May. And at that meeting, if you recall, I brought the entire list of all the properties the village owns to the meeting and had it available to the public. And at that meeting in May, I said in a public meeting, anybody has any ideas on what to do with any of these properties, and particularly these three, please contact me. To date, I haven't really had a whole lot of input. So at the last meeting, when I suggested having this put up for sale and changed, Councilman Friedman said exactly what you just said. Have we had any input? And so that's why I scheduled this meeting as early as I could. We're in the middle of budget hearings too. So this was the earliest I could do. As far as having 99 meetings, I feel like we have 99 meetings a lot. And as far as input, truthfully, looking at this audience, you're pretty much the people that give input. I'm out a lot. I was at a Chamber of Commerce lunch today. I was at Rotary yesterday. So I'm out listening to people, but a lot of people, this is the kind of interest they need to know, because what can't you do with the property? Those are zoning issues, for example. As far as what the village council, remember, they're the ultimate bosses. They don't have to accept any offer. They don't have to change any zoning, but it's going to come before them. But I wanted them to have something at least to consider. And this is tied to the budget discussions. The idea didn't come up at a regular meeting. It came up at a budget workshop, because we are having to draw down some funds to be able to keep the millage rate at 265. That's not a good position to be in, especially during storm season. But I didn't want to recommend to the council that we raise property taxes, and we've had some people that very strenuously said they didn't want to see taxes raised. But in order to get to the 265, we had to draw down some fund balances to a point I wasn't very comfortable with. And I thought at least the option would be, if we could sell the church for around what we paid for it, at least, that would at least, it would not be to use that money and go spend something else on it. It would be to replenish our fund balances. And so that was my idea on it. Once again, it's just to give the village council that option. We're not saying you have to change the zoning, you have to sell it, accept any offer. It's just saying, let's put all these things, because we've owned that property for a year. I have not seen really any viable proposals for it. I did take the option, the initiative, and about a month ago, Tony Hammond graciously gave us a tour of the building. Jennifer came, Sheila Denoncourt, our building official, Fire Chief Terry Abel went, AJ Engelmeyer, our Public Works Director, went. We toured the whole thing, and I asked Sheila, who's like an expert, what would it take realistically to get this building to where it could be usable just in the current? She said about $1 million. And at this point, as our council people here know, we're not sitting on $1 million and we can just go out and spend on a building that we still don't know what we can do with it. So that's why I proposed at least put it on the market, see if we get any offers, offers that they're willing to accept. If somebody came in and wanted to put a mall there or something and the village council said we really don't want that, then you don't have to accept the contract. But until you put it on the market, you have no idea what people may or may not want to do with it. I'm not sure if that answered your question, Elizabeth. You have rebuttal if you want. This is a back and forth. We're in the whatever you want it to be phase.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is the way I was hoping. Again, super glad that we're here. How exciting to have this nice public opportunity. I was hoping that this meeting would be organized in a way to have meaningful conversation about the highest and best use. And I was hoping that we could do some organized information sharing. So what I would like to know before we decide to put it on the market is five things. If our department heads have any identifiable uses for the properties, are there village needs that aren't being met? For example, could AJ put his trucks at the church and relocate all that stuff out there over to that property? Does Maria get recreational requests that aren't being met? Does the church need to be a dedicated pickleball court area? I bet if that were floated, the whole town would be super excited. Does Terry need something? Because he is the staff member that has the most initiative that I see in outfitting his department, and I bet he needs something. But I don't know if he's been asked. Number two, and I say that with fond affection, I would be very curious to know what our stakeholders need. Can we locate stakeholders outside of this group, because we pay attention, who represent segments of the community who need things? Does the chamber have ideas? Do our youth groups need something? Apparently, well, I'll just leave it at that. The third thing is we've been talking about affordable housing for years, like we actually want some in this town. Can we task our affordable housing committee to actually look at these properties and bring back some viable options? We have a land acquisition committee headed by Pete Frezza with some super smart people on the committee. Can we task those people to bring back some ideas, give them the direction, and I guess this is for the council, to have that group come back with some real ideas that are based on a needs assessment of what our town needs. Finally, we're paying Able City East a lot of money to work on a comp plan and presumably look at some of these bigger ideas. And can we task our manager to reach out to this group and bring back some preliminary ideas? We're already paying them money to do this, and that might be something to look into. I think without thoroughly discussing all of these ideas, which are not simply can't happen tonight, but what can happen tonight might be recommendations for how to move forward for our next meeting. But I think without thoroughly having this discussion, it would be as foolish to sell the properties as it was without a plan, as it was to purchase them without a plan. There we go. That's it. I mean, I might have something else to say, but there's my initial thought.
And once again, this is meant to be an informal meeting, input, and I appreciate that input. And in response to your question, once again, this was coming from me as a recommendation to the council. It's totally up to them to do it. As I'm getting communications from the mayor and vice mayor, and let's just say it's on the table as whether we even proceed on the 9th. If they feel they need more input, I'm open to more input. I just haven't been getting it. Those meetings you've talked about, I've been to the Affordable Housing Committee meeting, I've been to land acquisition meetings, and I have not heard input from any of the committee members about what we should or shouldn't do with these three particular properties. In my opinion, it's pretty much a given that Machado will be housing. I looked at maybe putting Public Works over there, recommending that, and got shot down pretty quickly on that from some people. And the neighbors weren't thrilled about it. So I think housing would probably be the most likely use for the Machado property. We have in the audience a representative of a... Yeah. We have some of the Trent's here from the Gorman Group, for example, that I've already talked to that may have interest in some of these properties for housing. Housing is identified, workforce affordable housing is an identified need by every council person I've talked to. Everybody agrees. The question is, where do you put it? Who pays for it, et cetera? Those are good questions. So I think Machado is a done deal as far as housing, but that's final decisions up to the council. The church property, that's a difficult one because of the current zoning. And my point was, as a realtor, you would understand the highest and best use means, where you're going to get the most interest. But I want to remind everybody, if the council did decide to do this, every single contract, I'm a real estate lawyer, you don't have to accept a contract, even at full price. You can say, we've chosen not to accept that offer. I think the good thing of the previous council, which you were on and the mayor was on, by buying it, and let's just say it's not unanimous, that was a great idea, but we did. Now this current council controls the future of that property, which they did not do before, totally. They could mess with the zoning, let's say, but I think owning the property puts us in a strong position to negotiate. But once again, no contract would get accepted without a majority of the council agreeing to it. I just want to have that option open. If a majority of the council in my meetings with them say September 9th is too soon, I have control of the agenda, I can withdraw it, if that's the issue. If more public input is needed, I'm willing to wait to put it on the agenda. My point has been, up to today, I haven't gotten a whole lot of input. And so I'm one of these action people, like, it's when it's time to move, it's time to move. And I just haven't seen any movement because we paid $4 million for one property, $2.75 million for another one, $1.7 for another one. And I've gotten zero input from the public, at least, of what to do with those properties. And so I'm just trying to get the ball rolling, particularly with the housing. Housing is everybody in here, I think, agrees, workforce affordable housing is an urgent priority. But we've been sitting on these properties for a year, and I've not seen one plan of what we should or shouldn't do with them. Elizabeth, and once again, it's not just me and Elizabeth talking. Anybody wants to talk, it's an open discussion. Go ahead. Let Joe go then.
Yes, I guess my main question is, when you say you haven't had any discussion, I know there's been a lot of discussion concerning the Island Silver and Spice. We even had something kind of drawn up. I know Van even approached something about how to put a whole bunch of housing units there. So there have been a lot of discussions with workforce and affordable housing on a lot of these properties. I guess my biggest problem is trying to sell a property to help balance the budget is absolutely the wrong way to go. I mean, I look at, in 2020 and 21, our budget was $35.8 million. Last year, it was $60.7 million. I believe that our department heads ought to be able to get together and come up with cuts to get us back closer to what we used to be. We had good service back then. Our service wasn't lousy, and that's why we had to almost double our budget. And I guess my last one is, I have that whole list of properties that you gave us before. A lot of them say vacant or not permitted, but there's got to be some of these properties that would be good for putting the equipment that we now have as eyesores around the park.
Well, let me give a couple of responses to this informal. Actually, in one of the plans I put in the package, there was, when we bought Silver and Spice, there was a parking lot plan here with 96 parking spaces. We own 3 lots. They're 100 by 167 each, so 300 foot on. It's between US 1 and the old highway. There's a very nice one, nicely landscaped. It's in the packet for tonight. That's just one plan. It'd be a whole parking lot, no buildings. That's one extreme. The other extreme would be put all apartments. Another one would be put a community center. So I'm not saying there haven't been any ideas, but nothing beyond just kind of talking about it. And that's why we're having this meeting tonight, is to get a little more direction from the public. And that's why all 5 council people are listening, either in person or online. As far as the budget goes, it's not a budget workshop. I will repeat again, I didn't necessarily look at the budget increase, because budget takes into account grants, sales taxes, gas taxes, and we want as much of that as possible. What I looked at was property taxes, and that's only about 16% of the budget, and we kept the millage rate. It still has to be approved. we try to keep it at last year's millage rate. So you're not going to see a huge increase in property taxes unless the property appraiser, Scott Russell, jacked up your values. But as far as the village goes, we've kept the value the same, and to do what you've said, we've already done it. The chief, Jennifer, everybody came in already, and that's how we got to 265. It was, we have tightened up the budget. I have terminated 2 employees, one of them today. We've not filled some vacant positions. So we made some tough choices already to get to the 265. And we cut some things in public works, for example, some equipment purchases, et cetera. So to get to the 265, we've already done a lot of that hard work you're talking about. We still have more budget hearings, 2 more budget hearings to go through that. But I just don't want to let it go without saying it hasn't been easy to get to where we are. There were some tough decisions, and we have 2 directors here that participated in it, and they will tell you we had some difficult discussions about who would stay and who would go. And especially when you looked at what Monroe County did, and they fired 40 people and cut a lot of services. They eliminated the entire transit department. The one we were counting on, for example, to take over Freebie, that's gone. And so it's not just what we're doing. We're looking at other government bodies, and then school board's going to raise their millage rates. We're not. So you have to take the whole picture. But I just don't want to say that we're not doing what you're saying. I appreciate your input, but I think we have done what you're talking about doing. As far as the actual properties, Silver and Spice is a good example. That's kind of a blank slate where there's a lot of things you could do with it. Paid parking, there's 0 paid parking in the village right now. I've already talked to some companies about, I'm trying to run the village, not me trying to run it, but let's say the village should be run more like a business as far as generating revenues. A paid parking lot would be one way to do it. We're looking at maybe having a trolley, that you can get people traveling on set rather than a freebie, which is a point-to-point thing. So we're trying to look at ways to save some money, but these things take time. But tonight's the first time we're actually giving the direct public input, and we have people here with history. We have Beth here, whose husband was one of the founders of the Village of Amarada. We have Elizabeth, who's a former member. We have 3 members of the audience of the council, 2 members watching. We have 2 department heads here. We have people in the audience that have been around for years. So this is the reason we had this meeting tonight was to get the ball rolling. And if anybody has any good ideas, tonight or next week or whatever, bring them in. But I just didn't, and the law of inertia, Newton's law of inertia says a body in motion remains in motion, a body at rest stays at rest. These things have been at rest for a while. That's my little speech. Any other questions, since Jennifer's been kind enough to stay here during the rainstorm, any questions for Jennifer on her presentation, or any questions on zoning?
Hi, I do have a quick question on the Machado lots. How large are each of the respective lots? Because as one other commenter noted, it would be good to keep 2 of them as hammock, but how much space would be left over?
I don't have that calculation tonight, but if you follow up with my contact information, I can get that for you.
Sure. And as the village looks to explore affordable and workforce housing options on those sites, what is its plan for deploying its allocation of 300 early evacuation ROGO units that would allow somebody to come in and actually build affordable housing units and not just control the site?
What do you mean by plan?
Or I guess, because right now I don't think that the village is in a place where that they can actually deploy their early evacuation
Yeah, we
units.
can.
That needs, you can?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
We already have deployed 8 of them.
Oh, okay. For some reason, I thought needed to go through a comprehensive plan amendment to
No,
allow
we
yourself
already
to
did
do
that.
that. Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Sure.
And that does bring up another point, too. I've been approached by several people from Marathon that want to know if we would be willing to let them have some of our units. And my individual discussions with our council people, there wasn't a very warm response to that. And then Jennifer pointed out there may not be, even if we wanted to do it, which don't necessarily want to, there's no mechanism to do that. So that question has come up, like if we built them in Key Largo, I had that session with Trent, whether if they built one in Key Largo, only let's say 5 miles out, and gave first preference to village residents. But when I ran that past Jennifer, apparently there's no mechanism to do that. Even if it's just a mile out of our limits, we cannot move our allocations anywhere outside the village. Is that an accurate representation?
That is. Currently, that's correct.
It was a good idea, but apparently we just can't do it.
Jennifer, thank you for that presentation.
You're welcome.
Can you just shed some light on, like, say, for the Machado lots, for a contractor to come in and be motivated to build there, would they be motivated to just do that, or would it be more likely if we included other spots for them to include because of maybe tax incentives?
I mean, I can't speak to that. I'm not a developer. I mean, we do have a developer in the room. So, I mean, I don't know what their return on investment would be. I don't know, I think it would all depend on like what we're offering is, are we leasing them the land? Are we giving them the land? Are we selling I mean, I think a lot of that would depend on that and how many units they could get out of it.
So it's not necessary to include other properties. Somebody could potentially come in and develop that as workforce affordable housing for unjust.
Oh, I would imagine somebody could, yes.
And Trent, maybe you can address that too, because I had that specific discussion earlier, I guess it was this week, about whether a developer who wants to put workforce housing, whether it's economically feasible to do it. What is the minimum size for a development to make it worth doing? Like, for example, Trent's with Gorman, and they've done a lot of projects in the Keys, but is there a minimum number of units that make it worthwhile doing? Because obviously the more units, I think that's what Steve was talking about, is what is the critical mass of how many units it would take to make it economically feasible for someone like Gorman to do something?
I think for affordable and workforce housing units like this, at this scale, or require, a 9% tax credit subsidy that you would apply to Florida Housing Finance Corporation and to apply for an allocation of tax credits, you need at least 30 units. So I think that's probably for how much the land underneath costs and what the cost to build at that scale would be. I would say you need at least 30 units to kind of make that transaction work. I guess the other option is if somebody just had independent sort of employee housing needs, they would deploy those units and build their own housing to house their own employees, or they had other sort of motivations. But I don't necessarily think that somebody would be able to make it financially feasible, just debt and private equity on such a small scale with the restricted rents and incomes to make that sort of work. But I think 30 units is probably the scale.
Captain Ed, you had something?
Yeah, when I was...
Wait for the mic so they can. Once again, we do have people watching at home, and one thing I found is that when they're watching from home, they can't always hear what you're saying if they're not here. So that's why just take a second to have the mic so that people watching, including our mayor and vice mayor, can hear what you're saying.
Okay, when I was elected to the school board, I wound up being the school board's rep to the County Affordable Housing Task Force, which was extremely well organized, professionally moderated, lots of high-level presentations, including from pretty much everybody who ever built any affordable housing successfully in the Keys. And the conclusion that we came to repeatedly, generically, echoes what this gentleman just said, that unless you take the real estate value out from under, which means public land or donated land, you can't realistically build actually affordable housing so that deputies don't have to camp out in the public facilities in Key West and commute home on the weekends, and all the other things that have been happening here, which is why the school board is converting their long-standing headquarters in Key West. You just can't pay for our kind of real estate and make it realistically affordable. And we keep having that happen with the county's recent move, starting out $3,000 a month. Yeah. But back to our general financial straits that we're in, I have to say the worst possible marketing strategy would be to announce to everybody that we're in financial straits and encouraging lowball offers by wealthy people looking for bargains from properties we haven't realistically held long enough to have increased in generic real estate value. We haven't owned this stuff long enough. And in a couple cases, we might be lucky to get significantly less than what we paid for them. there are some considerations on the church property, some limitations of the property that weren't well aired during the process, which might make it lucky for us to get. So we'd be better off in general to figure out how to get some value out of property that we already own before we sell it in a unencouraging fiscal environment. And surely any buyer that's going to talk to us, if they watch this meeting, they're going to expect zoning and permitting concessions and favors and all kinds of things that just don't make us strong negotiators at any point in this process right now. So probably fiscal sobriety is the first step, and certainly long-term evaluations of this. But as is often the case, you have to tap the village taxpayers on the shoulder more than once to get their attention and their participation in. And this is certainly a great, although depressing, beginning in that respect. It would be precipitous to make any moves right now and almost guarantee low-ball presentations and expectations of all sorts of concessions and so forth that are really not in the public interest.
Well, let me make a couple responses. Number one, we're not in financial straits. If that impression was made, our budget is in relatively good shape. I mean, it could be better compared to, let's say, the counties. We're in pretty good shape, for example. So I think we're financially stable. My point was, I'd be more comfortable with the current budget if we had higher fund balances. Because I'm not saying we need to go out and spend it like Joe's implying. We're not saying that we need the money to go spend it. I just want the money to restore the balances to what they were similar to last year's. Not that we have to have it to balance the budget. The 265 budget that the council is going to be voting on, it's a legitimate budget, and we can have that budget passed, and hopefully will pass, and we're good to go. But I felt more comfortable if we had those balances increase. But once again, I'm not even thinking about having a lowball offer. I have some experience. I'm an attorney. I was the real estate attorney for the Board of Realtors in Key West. I was actually a broker. I was broker at Ocean Rico Properties with a guy named Russ Post. I was his broker for a while. I've done real estate for a while. I'm not looking at having any lowball offers. Now, once again, the final say is the council. I will never recommend, at least in the short term, taking any lowball offer. You can make an offer all you want to, but it's a two-way street. It's a willing buyer, willing seller. I wouldn't recommend that we're a willing seller at anything less than what we bought it for. And I've talked to some brokers who I'm friends with, including the one that Elizabeth works for. I'll mention his name, but we all know who I'm talking about. And he told me he thinks that we're in the ballpark. We could probably get close to what we paid for it. Now, until it's on the market, you never know. And until you change the zoning, you never know. But once again, that wouldn't be my recommendation. My recommendation would be have an open door, but you don't have to take any offer, and I certainly would not recommend taking an offer less than what we pay for the property. But until you put it on the market, who knows? Deb, did you have a...
I just wanted to hear you say all those things.
Yes, I said it on the record. Yes. Deb?
Yeah, I was just going to comment on the land for affordable housing, building affordable housing. The developers don't necessarily have to buy the land. We have a project here in town that is a lease. So there is a way of setting it up, a lease for the developer, and we control that too, of how much that lease is and how long and all that good stuff. So it helps in that number of making it viable for them to build by us participating in things like that. We have other properties that we can add to. I don't know that we'd necessarily, it depends on what we add on, but we might be able to get close to 30 with 2 or 3 properties. But I think it's important for people to understand that we don't necessarily have to sell the developer the land, that it can be a leased situation for the village.
And as Captain has said, we've been watching what the county's been doing. They came out with supposedly affordable housing units at $3,000 a month. They caught so much feedback that they've already reconsidered that. Key West is building the lofts of Bahama Village. They got subsidized by the land authority, and still their units were too expensive. So it's a lot harder to do than you might think. Affordable housing is a concept, but it's a very difficult one to achieve. We have council. Anna, did you want to say anything? Because two of them have spoken. Do you? Okay. I guess Elizabeth. Now you want to?
I did.
Sue.
So what I love about you, Ron, is that you do get things done, and it's pretty cool. In a very short time that you've been here, you've done a lot of really good things, and in a way that seems to satisfy a bunch of loud voices. And I would just say, I appreciate your candor in saying that you're concerned about the fund balance like under your watch. I don't think anyone is going to blame you for a fund balance shortage at all. If we're talking about selling this property before a robust this one property, the church property, before a robust conversation, then we ought to just put the Island Silver and Spice up for sale as well. And you know, I mean, someone might want to buy that. And so I think that maybe, I wonder if there is a way to walk back this request of the council, do we want to sell it, and turn it into a conversation by the council on how you want to move forward in considering the best use for our town, considering the fact that we own these properties. And that's on the agenda rather than, do you want to sell it? Because that is a job that the council, I think even just for a perception problem, like let's all agree that the council is working in the best interest of the community, and we haven't gotten to a place where I don't think where we've even thought about a process that would get us to a point where we could even entertain selling. So I wonder if we can switch that agenda item. Not, do you want to sell, I mean, again, the church and the Island Silver and Spice, but how would you like to move forward in gathering enough information to make a decision? I'd like to put that request in.
And once again, I'm the manager, but I work for 5 council people, and they're here tonight, either in person or watching, and I think that's a valid point. I'm just trying to get the discussion moving ahead. And we've been sitting on this property for a year. On August 11th, we took back over possession. We're now paying the utility bills, for example. And so I just didn't like sitting on a piece of property where we're incurring expenses with no plan, zero plan. If we get a plan out of this tonight or whenever, I'd be more than happy to have that go forward. We could maybe combine the Machado and the church properties to get to that magic number we need for the housing, for example. Those are things that's the reason we're having this meeting tonight, is just figure out what are some options that we have. I just didn't like the fact that we're at a point of inertia where I didn't see any action moving. And I think tonight we're already hearing some good things. Once again, all 5 council people are hearing you tonight, hearing us, and I think we're making positive steps there. Sue, then Beth.
Sue Miller. From a historical point of view, all 3 of the properties we're discussing now were bought for the specific purpose of avoiding having somebody else buy them to put something on those properties that the village doesn't want to be on those properties. And yet now you're talking about changing the zoning to the most flexible zoning so that you will increase the value. And I just have a real serious problem with that. I love to buy property. I hate to sell property. The fact that we are even talking about selling a property for the purpose of restoring a fund balance is just, it goes against my grain. We had a 0 fund balance after 2017, and look what we've done. We can always restore a fund balance by making wise decisions about how we spend our money. And so I just cringe to think that we would sell property to restore a fund balance. That can only work one time. Once the property's gone, then what do you do next year when you have a fund balance problem? And so that just doesn't work for me. I want to say that it is really disappointing that we have fewer people than I would have hoped here to discuss this. Same with every council meeting recently. And I think that one of the things that I hope for our village manager is that he can restore the interest in our community that the public seems to have lost. I don't know whether they've lost that interest because they think their voice isn't being heard. I hear that all the time. What difference does it make if I talk? Nobody's listening. And I think that Manager Saunders can change that perception single-handedly. I would like to say that I have lots of plans on what we could do for each one of those properties. And I sent a suggestion to Greg Oravec when that property was bought. And I still believe that that is a prize location. It would break my heart if the village ever sold that property. It's right in the heart of Alamorada. It should be our community center. It was why we bought it. We didn't want a gas station there. And so...
You talking about the church or Silver and Spice?
I'm talking about Island Silver and Spice that we bought back Greg Oravec.
I just want to make clear because I think people thought you were talking about the church.
Greg Oravec's era. And that, to me, I picture it as being a true center of our community with a lot of things on that property that identify us as a community. I see putting the old historic caboose on that property, having a little museum of sorts on the property, having a little bandstand where people can go and entertain some of the musicians, having carts where people could sell their artwork, having a farmer's market, and creating an entire walkable community with that as the center, and having walkways to our other businesses with signage showing what each alleyway going to the ocean might have in store for you. Talk about what makes Alamorada special, and I think that it's a community project that we could all get involved with. I think that resolution that was originally passed, I think in 2021, 2022, that had as part of the resolution the site plan with 100 parking spaces, 96 regular parking spaces and 4 handicap parking spaces was part of the resolution, with the suggestion that all we need to do is level it and create 100 parking spaces on a temporary basis until we decide what to do with the parking. Make it paid parking. It'll pay some of our bills with the paid parking until we decide what to do. We still haven't decided what to do. It's sitting there empty, no parking. And it's really a shame that we never seem to have a plan for any of the properties. The Machado property, you've just said that you wanted to change zoning to maximize the potential uses of the properties. Change the zoning on Machado so that you can put 15 affordable homes per acre instead of 4 per lot. And I think you can just about double the number of units, add the Woods Corner, the Woods Avenue 8 units, and you're probably at 30. I think 30 is an exaggerated number. I think that with tax credits, you don't need that many. It's nice to have that many, but from a legal point of view, I don't think it's required to use tax credits. And the only way that we can ever create, I just don't think affordable housing is something that's practical in this community without subsidized help from the government, whether it's our government, the TDC. The TDC just helped buy the South Cliff Estates property, that was property that could have been utilized by Alamorada. They used both DAC 4 and DAC 5 money for that, because we're sitting on our hands not doing anything, and we need to start having a plan. Thank you.
And a couple of points. One is that even though this is relatively low attendance, it is being broadcast. A lot of people tell me, especially with the rain outside, they were going to be participating by watching this. Number two, not everybody comes to meetings, but they do have input. I get a lot of email, a lot of phone calls, including from some of you. I think Sue and I talk once or twice a week, and has a lot of good ideas. So just because it's a low attendance night does not mean we're not listening. We have council people here that I'm sure when they go to Winn-Dixie or Publix, they get an earful whenever they go out to their meetings too. So we are getting a lot of input. The problem I was having is that it wasn't specific enough to actually make some decisions. Number two, the only property that I was considering bringing to the council was the church property. The Machado, I think we want to look at housing there. The issue that Trent was talking about, how many units, that's a financial decision that we need to work with them on about whether we contribute the property or not. I like the idea of increasing densities. But once again, every decision you make, you have neighbors. And we have a lot of people that don't want anything in certain areas, no matter what. They want to keep it a park. That's a point of view. But once again, we paid a lot of money for these properties, and we can't keep them all parks. As far as the Silver and Spice, I agree with you. You and I have had those discussions about making that a viable downtown area. I have my own personal tonight was not for me to give you my ideas. I have some, but it was to hear your ideas. And so the Silver and Spice in particular, I have some definite ideas, but I didn't want to influence the conversation. I will say parking is a part of it, because I think paid parking is an idea, not necessarily for the whole piece of property. But I just want to clarify that basically a lot of people are listening, they are participating. Our newsletter has been very well received. We're getting a lot more people that read the newsletters. We're getting a lot of information out there. And so I want people to feel comfortable that we are listening. All five council people and I are listening to you, and get us as much detail as you want. Beth, did you have some?
I did. First of all, I really want to thank Elizabeth and you both for the idea of entertaining a conversation about what to do with the properties and how to make that like a legitimate conversation with council and everybody, so everybody can hear it legitimately and make it a for real place rather than us all expounding willy-nilly, whatever. Because for me, that church property is so ideal for all kinds of art possibilities. I mean, it's got a stage, it's a beautiful theater. It was once the movie theater, and it's a very legitimate building. It's been there for a very long time. We have a new art administrator. It would be so incredibly wonderful to be able to bring her into a conversation about possibilities. I know Coral Gables once did a beautiful private-public partnership for their O Cinema. I don't know if you remember that, but it was a really a sort of, at the time, like early 2000s idea of a avant, sort of independent movie theater. We don't have one around. And I'm sure there are plenty of adults who wouldn't mind going to be able to see an adult movie every now and then. And then there's housing possibilities. I mean, it would be a really great conversation for our community to have. And I love the idea of being able to make that happen so we could put some ideas forward about what that space could be.
You're after him. I got you.
So I just wanted to quickly touch on the distinction of a few different affordable and workforce housing types and like what those distinctions are, because somebody mentioned the property at South Cliff Estates that the county is working on that has $3,000 rents for one-bedroom apartments. And I think the two sort of diverging paths of affordable and workforce housing developments are just that. One utilizes debt and private equity, and they leverage those 120% of area median income rents to just make it work, and that's where you see eye-popping rents like that. The more scarce and more difficult to accomplish projects are the FHFC 9% tax credit projects. That's, we developed and owned WetNet Villas in Isla Mirada. It's 36 units, and it's 60% AMI and below, and the rents are very manageable. But it's more difficult to accomplish because the tax credit application process is competitive. The Florida Keys sometimes get a goal and they get a preference, so if a project is put in, they're more likely to get selected. But I just did want to make a note that the 30 units, that is a strict number in the RFA. It used to be 20 units, but now in the small and medium county RFA for 9% tax credits, it's 30 units to be able to qualify. It's not necessarily a, we need X amount of scale to get land per unit down enough, or it's not like a market rate calculation like that, or even a workforce calculation like that, where you need density to kind of make the numbers work. It's more of just what you need to qualify. You're expecting that you're paying a lot more per unit in land, and that you're still going to be held to that 60% AMI and below number, or 80% AMI and below rents that are really going to achieve affordability in the community, and you're not going to see those eye-popping rents. So, just as I kind of listen and think about this, it's like, I think that, whatever you do at the lots, if you are selling them for the purposes of affordable housing, that should be a conversation with whoever's offering to buy the property and saying, are you going to be utilizing FHFC financing? Because it sounds like most people, again, and other people I talk to throughout the county on other projects we're working on, they want to see deeper subsidy affordable housing, not 120% AMI housing. And to say, like, we're making this contingent on you applying for tax credits and receiving tax credits. And then with that being said, I don't necessarily, like, the tax credit subsidy is significant for a 9% project on 30 units. It is significant. It's obviously very expensive to build here. The land is expensive. But with that being said, you can work in a pretty reasonable amount on a per unit basis for land. Maybe it's not $100,000 per unit in land, but it can be significant in a structure like this. And maybe, the form of a purchase agreement could take form of, we're paying you X amount per unit up front, and you're giving a seller financing with an interest rate, and 15 plus years down the line when we reposition the property or refinance and we can pull money out, that we pay that down at that time, or something like that. Just being creative with how people come to the table with offers if they're explicitly wanting to build affordable housing. And that's about it. Thank you.
Ms. Friedman?
Okay, a couple of things. One with regard to the church. As part of the Founders Park Master Plan, this building that we're in, there are plans to go up and out over the pickleball courts and to build more pickleball courts. Now, I don't know how much that will cost, but it seems to me if we have a building that we already own that has a big room and other areas that can accommodate some of those functions, we might, if the cost is about the same, we might consider doing that rather than selling that church. The second thing I wanted to talk about is I have a suggestion for the Island Silver and Spice property, very much like Sue's, only I picture it as being a model of like Wynwood Yard was up in the Wynwood Walls Arts District. I don't know if any of you ever ate there, but it was, I don't know if it was a U shape or an L shape of food trucks with tents down the center and long communal tables where you would sit and you would talk to people across from you, you would talk to people next to you that you would never speak to if you were in separate tables. And I think that that could bring some revenue in until we decide what it is we permanently want to do with that space. And there would still be some room for some parking, maybe a pick-up and drop-off spot for freebie, a few other ideas like that. But I think something like that could be entertained as a temporary income-producing area. That's it.
And once again, I've been talking to at least 2 or 3 companies that do parking, including the one that does City Key West. It's all done on apps now. And you can give free parking, for example, to residents. If you're a village resident, you have X hours free. If you're a visitor, you would pay X dollars an hour. And the company enforces it. They go after the people who don't pay, et cetera. So there's some options out there to generate revenue. And the food truck idea, I think, what did you said is Wynwood? I think. The Wynwood Yard. Yeah. Yeah, I'm familiar. We're looking at. I've already talked to some people that have food trucks because the county just went through a divisive meeting about food truck ordinances, et cetera. So there is some interest in Alvarado doing it. I think we have to look at our ordinances of what you can and can't do. There are some restrictions on where you can and cannot put food trucks.
And I know we would get some pushback from some of the restaurants, but we're not talking about white tablecloth dining. We're talking about, grab and go, but it is a social environment as well. And I think that if we gave priority to the local restaurants, if they wanted to have a food truck there, I know Meat has a food truck there. I see them everywhere. So I kind of say that the idea that the restaurants wouldn't like it is a ship that's already sailed. They're everywhere, the food trucks. So it just seemed to me something to be inexpensive, easy, quick, fun.
And I think the idea of trying to put some parking there, I talked to Matt, whose company just did the Island Community Church, the new one. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, that parking lot is very impressive. It's not paved. It's gravel. It's very environmentally sensitive, beautiful landscaping. That would be the envision, what I'd see for the Silver and Spice moving forward, is to have a parking lot like that. Then you can still have multiple uses on it. You could do the food truck idea. You need that parking eventually, because right now, our parking situation in Alvarado is not as bad as Key West, but I was born and raised in Key West. Parking wasn't a problem until recently. We don't want that to happen here, where we find ourselves short on parking and we have no place to put a parking lot. That we have an ideal parking lot situation, not for the whole thing necessarily, but at least two of those lots can be parking, and then have the multiple uses that you're talking about. In the short, you could have a weekend farmers market. They have that down at Boondocks and Ramrod Key. They have a parking lot that turns into a market on Saturday mornings. So there's uses of it. Right now, I was there again today, and it looks horrible. It's obviously something got torn down there, just sitting there, kind of wasting away. And so that's why, once again, the meeting tonight is just to kickstart some of these things. It's not that we're making any decisions. It's just that no decisions were being made. I've got 5 council people that have said, let's see what we want to do these things, and we're just getting input tonight. I think Elizabeth wants to give us more input.
No, I just wonder how we move from this conversation, like the next step, because this is so, again, how cool that these people, we all showed up and we have some ideas, but I just wonder now, what's a meaningful next step, and so that the council can really make a decision that's reflective of a larger group of people, because that's really their job. And I know Sharon likes to do surveys, and sometimes it's controversial, but those do get lots of people to respond with real comments. And I don't know, maybe I'm just curious, like that could be something for you all to discuss in a public space, or how to gather input that everyone can be a part of, because whether you're getting private phone calls, that doesn't, as a public-facing conversation and as a PR, this could be a PR problem if it's not like a big open conversation. How do we hear that? And so, that's your challenge, council people. But I just wonder, what's the next step, and moving forward. Maybe that's where we are in this conversation.
And once again, this was not something that's been a long-term plan meeting. It came up at our last budget hearing, and I thought it was a valid point to say before we make a decision on the property, we should have a public input session, and this is what this is. As far as getting more input, we're always going to take input, but the problem was, that's why I had Jennifer come, because I had a lot of ideas, and every time I'd ask Jennifer, she'd go, nope, can't do that, nope, can't do that, because of our zoning code. And the other complication, I think, is something to take consideration, as I think Elizabeth said, Able City East is still working on a comp plan, and I keep asking Jennifer for the ETA on it, and I think the answer is close. And so I think it's probably a good idea to see what the comp plan says on some of these properties too. So I'm not talking about doing anything immediately with anything, and definitely not putting anything up for sale other than even possibly the church. I wasn't even talking about Machado or Silver and Spice. The only thing I was even suggesting was look at the church, because we actually did a site visit there, and the conservative estimate was it would take $1 million for us to get it sprinkled, new roof, all the things that probably have to be done to it. In our current budget situation, we're not in bad shape, but we don't have $1 million sitting around just to go do something. And so that was my point, was let's get the conversation going. If somebody has a better idea or even a good idea of what you can do with that church, come tell us. Because like I said, I have 5 council people listening or attending or listening online tonight, and they're hearing everything you're saying. But once again, it's very difficult, because That's why we asked some affordable housing people to be here, because it's more complicated than it seems. There are some minimum things. There's some state requirements I'm familiar with Housing Finance Agency. I sponsored the Sadowski Act back in the 90s that created a housing trust fund that the legislature chose to raid and not put it back into housing. So these have been issues that are not new issues for me. It's been a problem here for a while. Then you have people that for years have said, not in my backyard. We love affordable housing, just don't put it in my neighborhood. Those are realistic things that the council's going to have to look at and say, you want to put housing on the church property? Great. Go talk to the neighbors and see what they think about that. So these are all issues that the elected council have to be listening to. But I think we've made progress tonight of saying we are listening. It's more complicated than it looks. The county just went there. They thought they did a great thing. They got TDC funding to build tourism-related staff, and it came out at $3,000 a month for one bedroom, and let's just say it didn't go over really well. They're already backtracking. So the county commission's found out the hard way. This isn't easy either. City of Key West, same thing with the Bahama Village thing. They thought it was going to be really nice, and nobody can afford them. Because our costs down here between land and construction costs, they're not getting any better. It's going to get worse. And we haven't even seen the full impact of tariffs, et cetera, on the cost of construction. So I pity the people that are trying to build things here, because try to do a budget of what it's going to be like next year. I don't know how they're going to do it. That was Joe. You want to go back and then next week, anybody else? We want to make sure everybody has a chance to talk. Does everybody that want to talk have a chance to talk? Joe.
We've been pretty much discussing kind of the three properties, but in order to be saving money, I'm looking at the list that you gave us before. There's like a dozen properties on Big Pine Key. There's like 8 properties around Harry Harris Park. We have 3 properties on Little Torch Key. Well, if we can't do anything with those, why is there any discussion? I'm sure we're probably paying property taxes and all kinds of stuff on this. Well, I mean, what are we going to do? What are we doing with all these properties? That's like almost 24 properties right there.
Well, that's a great point. If you recall, I think it was the May 6th meeting when I did this list, I said in the public meeting that I had had a discussion with Cynthia Guerra. She is the executive director of the Monroe County Land Authority. And remember, this is in May. And I called her and I said, Cynthia, I had this list. I said, the Village of Alvarado owns lots in Little Torch Key, Big Pine Key, Key Largo. They're outside of our limits. You own property here. You, the county, own property in Alvarado. Why don't we do a property swap? There's no real money involved. And great idea. Another good idea that nothing's happened. Not to bug her very much, but to be clear though, almost all those lots were conservation lots. In other words, they were given a mitigation for something, and so it's not like they have a lot of value, because for the most part, you can't put anything on them. So it's not like there's a big value out there that we might use these lots for something. I'll defer to Jennifer, but she and I have looked at the lots, and for the most part, it'd be nice to consolidate the ones we have within the village and have the county take over the ones that are outside of our limits. But it's not going to solve any problems. It may be more concise, but I'll defer to Jennifer. In my opinion, all those lots, Little Torch, Big Pine, Key Largo, they are conservation lots. Now, some of them I've worked with Captain Ed on. Some of them should have easements that don't, and I've been waiting for months on that. I won't go into that. But I'm just saying, I don't think it's going to really fix anything other than cleaning up our property rolls. But I'll defer to Jennifer as far as potential uses for those properties.
Well, I just want to say several of those, if not all of those, were given to the village through BPAS for lot dedication. And so there's restrictions on those. Once they're given to the village through BPAS, they can't be transferred, sold, or anything else. There is a lot exchange provision for BPAS lots, but it's a very specific provision. So if we were to exchange them with the county, they would have to follow very specific rules for lot exchange. But they're restricted. They should all have conservation easements on them. If they don't, that would need to be corrected. But they cannot be built on. They cannot be, transferred, sold, anything like that. So they are all BPAS dedication lots. And we don't pay taxes. We're a tax exempt agency. So I don't know where you think we pay taxes.
Beth?
Yeah. Well, one thing that worries me a bit is for instance, when you talk about Island Silver and Spice property and you start talking about specifics, like it's going to need $1 million, we need a roof, we need this and we need that.
Like, this is the first time I'm hearing that you're even thinking about selling it, and I mean...
Let me correct you. I didn't say Silver and Spice. I said the community church.
That's what I meant, the church. So I didn't even, I heard, you're right. So when I heard the specifics about the church and like what it would take to get it up and running, and I didn't even know that it was even in anyone's mind to sell, and that we haven't even had a conversation. I was going to ask Elizabeth, like, have we talked about this at all? Like, has it come up in any meeting? Have we been able to discuss possibilities? Because then when you get down to nitty gritty, and we're not even like in the, idea stage, and you're already like, well, this is what it's going to take. I feel like I'm already like behind the 8 ball. And so what I would love is like, is there a way to find out what's actually on that property? Like, and be able to like, are there any houses? Because I sort of remember like back like apartments, but I could be really wrong. And is it just the church? It's just the church and offices. So is there a way for the community or me or whatever to actually see what's on that property and be able to like come up with maybe some ideas and that might be able to deal with you on that sort of granular level of where you might be at, because I would love to see it not demolished or not sold to whoever and used for something else.
And let me clarify. The previous council, not the current council, other than Mayor Mahoney, we have 4 new members on the council, so they had nothing to do with the church purchase or use or anything. So the village allowed the Island Community Church the use of that property, and we reassumed the use of it on August 11th, I believe it was. So they turned the keys back over to us. We're not paying utility bills. They moved into the new church. Beautiful church. Good job, Matt. But I'm saying we didn't have much to do with the church because the church was using it until August 11th. At that point, I had Chief Abel, Jennifer, Sheila Denoncourt, AJ Engelmeyer, and I think 1 or 2 other people. We actually did a whole tour of it, and because I hadn't been in it in years, and Sheila, who I trust completely, the building official, she said it needs a sprinkler system, it needs a new roof, and Terry was there too. Our fire chief was there saying there's some things that are issues there. And I said, conservatively speaking, let's say we want to keep it and do whatever we want to do with it. What would it cost? $1 million was what the ballpark was. Not that we won't do it, but that's why I said and so the only discussion has been at a budget workshop, not a hearing. I mentioned bringing it up from a budget standpoint. It would be nice to, if we don't have a plan for the building, put it up for sale, see what kind of price we would get. If we sold it, not go out and spend it and increase our budget, but just replenish the funds it was taken from. Those were taken from specific funds to buy the church.
Right.
I'm not saying that it's a council decision whether to sell it, keep it, put the money where they want to. That's a council decision. But once again, there was no discussion going on.
Right.
We have discussion tonight. I'm the one that sets the agenda at their direction, but I decide what's on the agenda. It was my agenda item, and at this point, what I'm hearing is that we probably don't want to have to take action on the 9th. I guess that's the day of it, and we can have more discussion, assuming there's discussion. But that was my point before was I've asked publicly for input, didn't get any, and therefore, okay, Elizabeth, you want to see action? Okay, here's my action. I put my chips on the table. You don't like what I'm saying, you bring me your chips and we'll play the game. But so at this point, we are paying for that church. We're paying the utility bills. It's sitting there. We're having to run the air conditioning to prevent it from getting mold and mildew.
Right.
So just to keep sitting on it without any idea what we're going to do with it didn't make much sense.
So let's get those ideas going and
well, what I like, I just sometimes ideas come to me. I think it'd be a great idea to have somebody, maybe the chief, since he does everything, go inside, walk around with Tony Hammond, take a video, see what we saw.
Right.
Because there's some issues with that building. It's not in as bad a shape as I thought it might be, but there are some serious concerns. Maybe have somebody do a walkthrough with a video, post it on our website, and say any member of the village that wants to look what the church looks like from the, because you can't really tell from the outside. But it's basically an old movie theater. In fact, our mayor used to go to movies there apparently.
Yeah.
And so she remembers being a movie theater. I went in there as a candidate where I spoke to the constituency there. I hadn't seen the classrooms. They're active classrooms as of like a month ago. They're being used for classrooms. And so some people have suggested making it classrooms or daycare. There's some suggested uses, but anybody wants to use that building, according to our building official, is looking at some serious money to have it be permitted, to have some uses there because of safety concerns. I'm not sure if the chief wants to see it. He saw it firsthand too, and he's an expert on that stuff. So that's a suggestion would be to have us go in and video it, put it on our website so everybody that's listening can see it for their own eyes.
And see the plans
And see the
also, not
plans.
just
The plans, a lot of it's on the website already. I have an appraisal that was done last year. It's a very complete appraisal. I was kind of surprised it came out at $4 million, but hey, that's what they paid for it. That's what it appraised at. And so the appraisal has very specific, renderings. I thought I have it on the website. If not, I'll put the appraisal on the website because that I know exactly what's over there. It's what's in the appraisal. It's a very detailed, very professional appraisal. If it's not on our website, it'll be on this week.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm into where Elizabeth was going. How do we make this real, like this conversation? Because I think we need to do that.
And once again, I'll put the appraisal. If it's not there, I can't remember if I put it up there. I will make it's public record. I'll put the appraisal was done a year ago on the website. I'll ask somebody from the staff to go over and on their phone, a video, do a walkthrough with maybe Tony Hammond, who's been very, very gracious and cordial, and take a walk through there and see what's in there with your own eyes. Because you can look at photographs. I think an appraisal is good. A video is even better. And at that point, maybe somebody can say, you know what, that'd make a great X. But once again, nothing is cheap in the village of Islamorada. And so if you want to put something in there, you better be willing to step up with some serious cash because there's no bargains out there to do anything in this. And you have to meet all the code requirements. We cannot waive anything. And so if you need sprinklers, you got to put sprinklers in it. You need a new roof, you're going to have to put a new roof. Elizabeth, anybody else before we get to Elizabeth?
Hey, Ron, since you called me out a few times.
In a good way.
I'm really thankful, actually, that the council bought the church because it gave me something to do. So, but looking back on it, I agree with Elizabeth that there's no way that we should be buying property that we don't have an intent to do something with. And it's amazing to me to sit in this room and see all the people that are talking about, what to do with this property, what to do with that property, and not a mention of buying environmental property. Sitting in on the last land acquisition committee and hearing that we're a committee of people that have no way of guiding or any money to acquire with, came up with the point of if we have some environmentally sensitive properties within the village, that money's not being handed out from Monroe County because everybody got slashed throughout the state. If we could come up with some funding to purchase those environmental friendly properties, then selling a property that has zero plan makes sense to be able to generate some revenue to go buy that environmentally sensitive property. So I think that should be part of this discussion as well. And just as a side joke, to get the party started, maybe we should do a survey. Should we start survey? Thanks.
And Matt reminds me of kind of how this came up. Part of the way I was able to get the recommendation to the council to get the millage rate down to last year's millage rate of 2.65, I attended a land acquisition meeting and they kept mentioning this $1 million fund, I think, that Elizabeth advocated for. And I didn't say anything, but I already knew in order to get the budget where it needed to be, we were going to have to reduce that fund balance. I didn't eliminate it. I left it enough for appraisals, for example. But we took it down from $1 million to about $25,000. That helped get us to where we are today. But what I said, I think, at the budget hearing was if we sold the church, one place I would want to replace those funds would be the land acquisition fund, where some of that money came from originally. So that does remind me, that is kind of how this came about as far as selling the church, was to basically replace that fund to do the things you're talking about as far as land acquisition, because part of the original purchase partially was from the capital fund. And Elizabeth was one of the ones that voted on it. So if you want to give more information, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that you can't talk. I don't feel it's fair to talk about selling the church. It's sell the Island Silver and Spice, sell it all. But it's ridiculous. Like, good point. We got no plan there is no plan for this money. And this isn't a conversation about the church. It's a bigger conversation about the lack of planning for our town. additionally, we're talking about the cost. Again, super respectfully, I know this is just a friendly conversation. We're talking about a cost to repair a roof. I mean, it's going to cost more than $1 million to do anything on the Island Silver and Spice. But let's be clear, in theory, we would put some plans together. We would budget for that. We would, this isn't, I don't know what the emergency is, but like, that's a brilliant idea. Yes, let's look for, your idea about conservation land, great idea. That if there was an intention, we sell with this plan in place, then it makes sense. So I feel like, and actually, I do feel like this is kind of on you, Ron, the administrator, to bring back a really logical and methodical way to proceed with all of the issues. And then, this, have you ever heard, it's easier to edit than create? Like, you bring me something and I'm going to tell you how much I hate it, but I have no ability to bring you something, but that's where we are. So anyway, okay, I think we should wrap this meeting up. Just not, if anyone else does.
But going back to the church property, just to be clear, when they originally bought it, the village council approved the use of $1.5 million from the general fund unrestricted fund balance, so that just came from general fund, and 2.495, basically 2.5 million from the capital projects fund. And so that's where the money came from to buy the church, and that's what I was saying was if we did sell it, maybe just replace those dollars where they came from. But once again, it's only because I had not heard any really viable ideas for what to do with the church. If somebody has a great idea, then bring it forward. I think tonight was the first step to that. And once again, since it was my idea to put on the agenda for the 9th, I may change that for the, I talk to every council member at least once a week. And so if they direct me to do something different, I work for them. But I just want to get the discussion going. I'm checking my phone because a lot of people are watching from home, and several of them are liking what happened tonight. And I think and I want to end by 7. So let's just say, here's my analysis. You've asked for my input. The church needs more discussion. I think I'm not going to recommend to move forward unless they direct me to. Let's hold the church and get more ideas. Silver and Spice, I don't want to have any discussion on that. I have my own ideas, let's just say, and I'd like to talk to the council before we go any further on that. So Silver and Spice isn't even on the discussion of selling, from my standpoint. Machado, I think the consensus I've heard is that's going to be housing. The question of how many units and where they go is more of a Jennifer situation, but I think that's unless I hear something different, Machado is pretty much going to be the house. If we're going to put housing anywhere, it's going to be Machado. Not that we don't have other place to put it. So that's my kind of final analysis. Let me kick it back to Jennifer for any last remarks. I think everybody's had Jerry, did you want to say anything? You've been quiet. Okay. We have
one person on Zoom, Alina Davis.
Okay. Go ahead.
Hi, Alina Davis, Isla Morada. I just have a couple of comments. I think the survey, I love a good survey. Get the council, get the village manager, whoever wants to create this survey to put out to the public, because they're very well responded to on what we should do with the church property. Number 2, Island Silver and Spice property. Leave the Machado property out of it. Second, appraisals. The appraisal that you got a year ago on the church property is only one person's opinion of value at a certain point in time. I just had 2 appraisals done on a property that I had for sale, and one came in at $3,500,000. The other came in at $3,850,000. So, as I said, it's just one person's opinion, and they don't have to sell it. Only realtors have to sell it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lena. And Jamie Ingles also weighed in, so we have several realtors watching online. So, and she says, great meeting, great conversation. So thank you, Jamie Ingle, who's also been very involved. Any final thoughts? Anybody has not had a chance to talk? We have Deb?
So I was just going to say about the environmental properties. I got involved in that because I'm the liaison to that committee. And I asked the question, the infrastructure tax funds can be used for purchasing property. So if the church sale, assuming that, goes and 2.47, almost 2.5 million, goes back into the infrastructure, it can be, and that committee has some properties that they would like to purchase, assuming we have the money.
Sue? I'll stay here all night if you want to, so don't complain if it goes past 7.
I just have a quick comment about environmentally sensitive properties. The best property that the village has ever purchased and will ever purchase, in my opinion, is Founders Park. And then we allow our Public Works Department to destroy a hammock on our property. We need to get rid of the Public Works equipment at Founders Park and at the Green Turtle Hammock. It is shameful. I know what a struggle it is to cut down a single mahogany tree. And to see what our own staff at Public Works has done to the Green Turtle Hammock and Founders Park next to Gimpy Gulch is just tragic. Thank you.
And Sue and I have had that discussion, and I'm in the process of dealing with those situations.
So the last thing I just wanted to say, I just wanted to follow up on the acquisition of environmental properties. I just want to remind people too that we're at the end of BPAS, and the acquisition of properties on the BPAS list was important for the village for potential takings claims and lawsuits. So we need to keep that in mind as well. So it's not just environmental properties we need to be paying attention to, it's also other properties we need to be paying attention to for the acquisition. So that's all I wanted to add.
And I think that's a good point I want to make too, is that some of you may be familiar with the Shands case. It's a court case that originated out of Marathon, and it has some serious implications for local governments, not just in the Keys, but around the state. And the takings cases are kind of in limbo right now. So I think from a fiscal standpoint, we need to be very concerned about our liability potentially on takings cases. I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to confuse the discussion, but there are reasons why we are probably going to sitting on some of these units just because we've decided as a village to not distribute all those units right away. Somebody had their hand up. I thought. I forgot to give you the microphone.
There have been many conversations about the sanctity of native species of trees. We've made it Islamorada policy that, for instance, in all the school board machinations, that we're not going to allow cutting down a single tree. That should be, of course, our policy on all of our park areas. And so there are some matters that you need to check into to be sure that we're not doing things in-house that we wouldn't allow anybody else to do as far as treating native species of trees less than respectfully.
I agree, as you know. Any other input before we conclude the meeting? Once again, I want to thank all the public for attending, both in person and on Zoom. I want to thank our council members here, Steve Friedman, Deb Gillis, Anna Richards. I want to thank our mayor, Sharon Mahoney, and Vice Mayor Don Horton, who are watching online. So we are listening to you, and we will do a couple things. One will be, I'll put the appraisal online for the church. I'll ask somebody to take a video of the interior of the church so we have as much information as I've seen. And then a survey is a good idea. I'll probably have more input in this survey, and so I'll try to make it one that will give us good information. The problem with the survey is, truthfully, it's how you ask the question. You have to know what you're trying to get to as far as the uses, and so that's why I thought it was important for Jennifer to be here, because I had ideas too, but then when you start looking at what you can and can't do, the survey should say, here are the allowable uses. Which of these uses? I don't know how else to say it in a fair way, because if you say you want to put something there that you can't do, what's the point of asking that question? So, Sue, was that what you're talking about? I'm not sure the survey, what kind of questions you're talking about. Like, what would be uses you'd want to see it on that property? What is it you're asking? Yeah, whose idea? Somebody's mentioned about the survey, which I don't think is a bad idea. It's just that what kind of questions are you talking about having on the survey? Matt, do you have some?
Please hold.
My problem with having a presentation that says what the current zoning says, and then you say, but we're going to change the zoning to maximize the value
Well,
of
no,
the...
that I want to be correct. I didn't say that.
Okay.
I said I wanted the council to consider whether they want to take. I don't have the power to change anybody's zoning.
No, I
but
didn't
want-
mean-
because
I
that's a village council decision.
No, I didn't
My point
mean-
was to find the highest and best use of the property to increase the value. But
Right.
once again, that whether to accept a contract or not would be totally up to the village council.
No, my issue is that when you say this is what can be put on the property, the village council, by majority vote, can change anything. They can change the uses in different zonings. They can change the zoning. So saying these are the limitations is not really a valid thing to imply. To put on a survey.
Maybe I misunderstood. Yeah, I'm not saying restrict it, but I'm saying but to be realistic. There's a certain number of units per acre. That's yes, they can change it, but I'm not sensing a lot of willingness to raise the height limitation or to increase a lot of the units on the per acre. So there's some things that could be on there, but I'm saying realistically, at least the council I've talked to, I have not really heard that from them, but I certainly would be open to any questions. So one thing would be to say submit questions that you would like to see on a survey, rather than having a survey, then say, here's the questions. If you have any suggestions, my email's public record. Go ahead and send me questions, and I'll try to come up with a survey that answers questions we want to hear from. Any last chance? Anybody else want to opine? Well, once again, this I think was very helpful, at least from my standpoint. Hopefully, from the council standpoint, and we welcome any input from those here or online. And we will now conclude our public workshop on village-owned properties. Thank you for coming.